Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Renate McNay and my guest today is Georgi White-Johnson. Hello, Georgi. Nice to have you here. Georgi is a spiritual teacher and she offers non-dual therapy with her partner Bart around the globe, and we find out later what that means or what non-dual therapy is. And Georgi wrote a wonderful book, and the book is called I Am Here, Opening the Windows of Life and Beauty. And I have to say, this is one of my most favorite books. It gives such a clear window into consciousness and what it means to be a human being. And I just heard the follow-up of this book is in the pipeline, and it's going to be called Stillness of the Wind. A very interesting title, Stillness of the Wind. Beautiful. And the book will be about the dance of duality.
Of duality.
The dance of duality.
Yes.
Okay. So Georgi was born in the UK and she presently lives in Israel with Bart, and there are 10 children. And we are going to hear Georgi's process which led her to write this book. And we start chronologically with your first awakening experience or your first memory, which was even further back than your first awakening experience when you were 2 years old.
Yeah. So before, when we open the windows of feeling, feeling memory, we have our memory which is this happened and this happened, the story memory, but we also have an experiential memory, a feeling memory. And so there's plenty of feeling memories of the first atmospheres before conception and in the womb, those places that we call home, which feel like the reality here. But then there's conscious memory. And I must have been around 2 years old, just learning to talk. And my mother had put me in the bed, I imagine, to take a little rest. I was told to go to sleep now for a while. And gone downstairs. And I lay there and I looked at my little legs. It was a big full-length bed. And I looked at these little legs and I noticed that they had grown longer than they were before. And it was a kind of mystery that these legs would grow longer too. I'm kind of looking at these legs. And then I needed to sleep, and so I closed my eyes, and it was the late 60s, so I imagine the word guitar was very much in the vocabulary. Right. My father was a record producer, so it was alive with culture in a way, the house. And I started thinking about guitars and saying the word guitar in my mind. It must have been that I just learned the word and had been appreciated for knowing the word. So I started thinking the word guitar, and I started saying guitar, 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 chanting it. And then I kind of woke up again, and this has nothing to do with the object. It was just these syllables in space, guitar, 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 in my thought. Yeah. No connection. It's kind of tricky when you're learning to talk as a baby to have this disconnection happen.
So it didn't have a connection to what? To
the object, to the guitar.
Oh, right.
That it was supposed to signify.
True. Yes.
Just guitar, 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 guitar. It's just sounds.
Yes.
And so I tried it with my own name.
Yeah.
And so I began Georgi, 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 Georgi. Again, there's no connection. And then it was, so who am I? This was the question, so who am I? And
you realized you're not the name.
Not Georgi.
Yeah.
And not a guitar. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Not this thought, not this label. And so this question, who am I? What then? What am I then? there was this kind of sense of consciousness, and then a leap of consciousness, becoming conscious of consciousness. So who am I? And then it was conscious of consciousness. This kind of, this expanding existence. And I was lying on the bed, and I was looking towards the window where the sunlight was coming through, and there was this kind of leap to the point of like not being able to contain this pure consciousness of who I am. And I kind of retracted from it. Where's my mummy? You know, and I could hear her downstairs in the kitchen. I could hear the pots and the pans being washed up. And I began thinking, mummy, and it's not mummy.
Yeah.
These sounds have no connection. But the feeling was of incredible homeness to it. It was almost like I was climbing the ladder back again. It was like reconnecting to a source which was so clearly where I'd arrived from.
But that was, you didn't know, did you know exactly what happened? Or is it just something you felt?
It's something I very much experienced. And what's amazing is that this memory is like a deep notch in my mind. I never forgot this memory.
But you didn't have the word consciousness with 2 years.
No.
So what was it actually? How could you define the experience in that age?
So Georgi was gone. There was no Georgi. Georgi was just Georgi. So it was this seeing of the curtain and of the light and of the little body on the bed.
Yeah.
But I wasn't this little body either. And then it was the seeing of the seeing. And then it was the seeing of the seeing of the seeing, but without leaving the body. Kind of like expanding in a kind of light of perception. Mm-hmm. But you know, we give words to it because we don't have words.
Sure.
I didn't have words then, for sure.
No, of course.
It was a very, very vital home, which was more home than the home I was physically in. And it's not that the home I was physically in was a bad home. It was just much more familiar. But also in this kind of conscious, not containable either. After that I fell asleep, which is also home. Gone.
So you didn't run to Mummy and told her what you experienced?
No. Well, Mummy wasn't Mummy. And I wasn't afraid. I really wasn't afraid. Mm-hmm. Maybe I was more afraid when I was put down to bed to sleep and began thinking about guitars than after this.
And did something change after this experience for you in the way you related?
It's so early, it's really such an early one, that in a way, a link that normally would be cemented between thought, in language, in words, and identity, and the world, was broken very early on. So I never really trusted it. I never really believed a word is what it says it is. I never really believed I was Georgi. I never really believed in this core layers of identity. So in a way it was a tremendous gift. Like, you're here human, but remember who you really are. Yeah. And I don't mean who you really are in a personal, private perspective at all. Okay. It's a benevolent breakage.
Yes.
Between word and the thing it's supposed to mean. Yeah. And since then, it became like a natural escape door, in a way. So when I was suffering, I could come to this place of pure consciousness in the now and step bigger than it. Not step out of it, but contain it much more easily. Be free of it within it.
So what did you have to do to step back into that?
Go into the felt sense of the body and really allow it. Really allow as real as we can be, the real reality. And that's not the reality which stops here. It's a kind of, because we can't find a reality, but we can allow reality to come to life in a way. So it's moving into the now. It's connected with the body, the miracle of the body, and letting it be. And then consciousness is free in a way.
So you mean with letting it be, whatever feelings are coming up, whatever emotions coming up, it's free to be. Is this what you mean?
You know, when you're able to let something be,
Yeah.
there's two.
Okay.
There is you that's able to allow,
Yeah.
and there's that which is experienced.
Yes.
So the moment that you can allow something to be, that which can allow comes much more to life.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a space opens up.
It's so interesting, you know, after doing so many interviews over the last years, we only started recently, actually, and that probably has to do with my own or our own process, realizing the importance in an awakening of the body.
Yeah.
Awakening happening through the body. Yeah, there's so much out there, so much talk about, but it's the awakening of the mind. Yeah, the body is somehow doesn't play any role, and that is more and more coming to the foreground, as if it would be, as if it is an evolutionary move into the body. That's how it appears for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, there is an evolution happening also in terms of our basic attitudes towards life, towards creation, towards this world of duality.
Yeah.
And many people, myself included, no different. So we, in a way, are often motivated in the spiritual search by an aversion to the physical, to all of this suffering, to this, we have a body, but it's not going to last, it's dying, it's aging, you can't trust it. We have a certain amount of time, but we don't know how long.
Yeah, it's messy and
it's full of loss, all the time loss and pain.
Yeah.
Nothing is stable. We try and make it stable. It breaks in our hands. There's love, but we can't hold it. We can't keep it. So many spiritual motors of development come from this rejection of creation.
Yes.
And by creation, I mean the physical world that we're seeing here now. And very quickly we move to this let it go. You're not your body, you're not your feelings, you're not your pain, you're not your emotions. And but what we're really moving with then is the energy of rejection, which is a big duality. It's not me. I'm enlightened. This is not me. I'm awakened now, so I'm not my body. And that energy becomes the dominant thing. So we're launching into another spiral of illusion in a way. It's based on fear. Nothing needs to get left out if we're not afraid. Nothing. Not one aspect, not one particle of our experience needs to be rejected. And it's not even ours. It's ours, but it's not personal.
Yeah. But that's the thing, It is, as you say, there's suffering, but I am not suffering.
Yeah.
There's pain, but I don't have pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's allowed to be there.
Yeah.
Because it's shared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's tricky because when you drop all form, everything that you can perceive, everything that you can think, everything you can feel, even the sense of being, and you move beyond it, or you just let it go completely, what emerges of itself is a natural care. We care. Life cares. It really deeply cares. And so we care about the suffering. We care so deeply about the pain which is here that we would be reincarnated by choice again and give up our enlightenment to be back here, to be of service. It's unstoppable, this care at the core of creation. And the problem is that we have these minds that want to avoid suffering, and in this kind of either or thinking of the way we're programmed as little children, we have this belief that if we don't suffer it, it's not there. Or if I pretend I'm never going to die, it's not going to happen. If I don't let this cruelty into my feeling of cruelty, if I don't acknowledge this feeling, it won't exist. And this is, in a way, the Achilles heel of the healer. It's the trap of the healer, because every doctor knows that you cannot heal any ailment unless you are prepared to go there, to look at it, to go into it, to receive it. And the same way, every doctor knows that you're not really healing anything, you are creating the conditions in which healing can happen through the natural wisdom of life. Life is the healer. We make the conditions by removing the obstacles for life to do what it of itself does, with this supreme intelligence. So sometimes it's really important, we find, me and Bart, in our lives and in our teaching, to really allow suffering. It doesn't matter if it's yours or not. It doesn't matter if it's on your bill or on the other's bill. To really, really, really allow it completely, to allow it to transform through you, or to allow it just to be, is enough. And this is where, in a way, the depths of karma is created when we reject the pain, the things we don't want to feel. And there's such an agenda there, and the agenda is back again into the mind. I'm enlightened, that means I'm free of suffering. I'm enlightened, that means I'm free of fear, free of jealousy, free of anger. It's not true, not with me, not at all. I'm free within it. Anger is free here. Jealousy is free here. It's free to move. It's free to tell its story. Fear is free. I'm often afraid. I'm often utterly and totally terrified, but it's just terror moving through me. I don't even know anymore if it's mine or not. It doesn't matter. And it's not a problem, because the freedom's also here. Does that make sense?
Completely. Our normal reaction is to run away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't want to feel it.
Yeah.
It's too awful, this feeling.
To run away or to freeze.
Or
just
to
to
freeze.
try and hold things as they are.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine, but then it's important to relax in the running away, to stay present to the running away, and to relax in the freezing.
Yeah.
If you relax into freezing, it can be quite beautiful.
Yeah. And I experienced several times, in the midst of the worst suffering, is beauty.
Yes.
Yeah. If it's allowed to be. Yeah. It just moves into beauty.
Yes, because if it's allowed to be, it has such a depth of truth in it.
So let's move a little bit back to your story. So you had continuously awakenings of similar kinds through your childhood. And at one point you were puzzled how this awakened consciousness couldn't stay. There were, in the interims, you would disappear.
Yeah.
So, retrospect, do you know where you went? Do you know what happens when we lose awareness?
And I remember one when I was walking to school in the morning, and suddenly I was there. I am here. Totally conscious, with this strangeness. You know, there is this strangeness when it's like you revisit yourself and in your life.
You recognize, being recognizes itself.
And then I'm walking and I'm vowing to myself, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay here. I was saying to Bart last night, it's a little bit like we are all drugged. Yeah. There's this opiate. And sometimes, you, like a dolphin, you pop above water and it's like, oh, this is the truth. And then vump into the drug state again. And you come up again, remind me of this, keep me there, and down in again. So that's the question, you know, what's with this ocean of non-heightened consciousness? What's in that ocean? Mm-hmm. So if we take the body as a landscape, in a way, the ocean is here, the horizon of the ocean. And here is the air and the sun and some seagulls and a lot of thoughts. Here's the horizon, and the ocean is feeling energy. And feeling isn't a thought. Now, how do we know feeling is not a thought? Because if you feel a feeling, immediately you're out of time, you're in the now. You can't feel your anger or your love for tomorrow or for yesterday or as part of a story. You can, but as a mental activity and kind of rip up a bit of love and put it in. But fundamentally, if we agree to feel how it is, how it feels to be here, we're immediately in the now. Mm. So we moved beyond time. Just like that, power of the now, just by feeling a feeling, even a sense perception, feeling the body, but also feeling an emotion or a feeling, we are in real time, we're in the now. We're in the now, and it's not stable. But here, in the level of feeling, and this is what in I Am Here we call awareness as opposed to consciousness, there is still space. There's bounded space, so we have a feeling. So the first feeling could be, you know, this is where I am and this is where I end. Or the grief can be here. So I don't want to feel the grief now, so I'll go to the joy, which I can get in the crack between the grief and next day's dinner, you know. So we move into a dimension of space. And it's really maybe important to realize there are two kinds of experiences going on when people talk about awakening and enlightenment. One is the freedom from time and the freedom from the mind and the freedom from the story. And then there's another kind of description where people talk about the sense of infinity and boundlessness. And those ones talk very much about love. These ones talk very much about peace, the peacefulness of being free from mind, the peace of mind, which is very much comes as a backdrop to conscious freedom of consciousness. Mm-hmm. The second ones experience this opening of the heart unconditionally. Nothing confines them anymore. They're free of some kind of energetic restrictions in what they're allowed to feel and how they're allowed to feel, and their being becomes one with a kind of one being.
And you talk about this as your own process. You know, you had this, your first awakening was from the head, and then you say your heart was still held prisoner. And then later the heart was open to unconditional love, and yet the body was still held prisoner. So what were these different stages? How, okay, I think we covered your awakening from the head. So how did you awaken your heart?
So
we made now a big jump in jump over years.
A few decades later. You know, conscious awakening was great for me. You know, it got me into Oxford. The conceptual mind was open. I could theorize and make an incredible amount of freedom in a way to kind of a universal mind and all of this. But like we said, the heart was still
literature,
English literature.
In English literature.
But literary theory.
Yes.
The theory of literature. So how do we approach it from a Marxist perspective or from a feminist perspective? Yeah. Went deeply into a Jungian perspective at that stage. But as children, we get shaped in how to be here, which is different from the identity. It's like how we're allowed to be. So is our love allowed to be unconditional? Are we allowed to feel our emotions? Or do we get rejected? So for a child, when they're rejected for crying too much or being too angry or being natural in a way, there was a kind of deep pain of separation born, kind of separate self on the energy level of feeling of what they're allowed to feel. And it's really a contraction. Contractions of form are created. And it's not even personal. The whole families carry contractions, whole nations carry, whole cultures carry contractions of form, that we will not be afraid, or we will not talk about death. Sexuality is huge. Nothing, there's two dirty words for me when I was a child. One was sex and the other was God. Mm-hmm. Not because my mother wasn't spiritual, but I felt so ashamed to say these words.
Yeah.
So here there was no freedom. And the best response for me was, in a way, to fix that with the mind. And so I moved very much like your other interviews were talking into fixing the outside, saving the world from this consciousness, from this awakening perspective. And I went deeply into journalism and exposing all kinds of horrors which were going to happen to the world. And what I was really in, and I was right, but
just to mention,
but I was,
Georgi worked for the BBC.
A little bit at the beginning,
Okay.
And later as an independent investigative journalist about the threat of global terrorism, but before there was any.
Right.
Before September. Otherwise it wouldn't have been a secret, would it? Yeah. But what was really driving me was the threat of the collapse of my own separate self. The fear of this ego needed to die. And at a certain stage it became so obsessive that the identity broke down under the pressure of this thinking, conscious, and I went into a period of a lot of panic attacks and anxiety, which of course at the time is living hell. It's really living hell with 3 little children to be suffering from panic, and the professional authorities of course come in with medications which I'm so grateful I didn't take. Yeah. And all kinds of diagnoses, which I'm so grateful I didn't believe.
So were you afraid of something, or was it just panic?
I was
fear?
Because the form, the focus of my attention was on the threat of non-conventional terrorism and exposing it.
Yes.
The work of an investigative journalist is very much imagining what could happen. So it's very fear-based, but I would empathically imagine and I would experience how it would be. And this, at the end, had its incredible toll on the nervous system.
Right.
I was trying to save children from that horror.
Right.
So it was quite an obsessive spin, driven from this incredible difficulty to come to peace.
Yeah.
Beneath the level of the head.
And did you understand at that time what happened?
No.
That this is connected?
No, I was saving the world.
Yeah.
I was on a campaign to bring the truth and to save lives, especially living in Israel. The threat that Jews could be gassed by terrorists and thousands could die, and that they weren't being told of the threat and being sent to gas mask stations to get equipped and all of this, for me felt like an incredible outrage. So there was also the sense of justice and history behind it. But I was running like hell away from myself. I was at the same time a mother of 3 little children, the greatest miracle of life of giving birth to 3 in a row, and it was terrifying, so I tried to fix the world. I was terrified of myself.
So, and what stopped you?
Nothing.
What
I cracked.
turned it around?
What turned around was I became dysfunctional. I couldn't function anymore, and luckily we took a sabbatical in that time in England, and there was an NHS counsellor who was amazing. Just listened. She just listened. No judgment. And then it stepped into a kind of apocalyptic depression, and I felt like I was looking at the ruins of my own ego structure. There was no way I could pick up the stories again. I had many connections through the internet, and they were kind of nagging for me to continue with the campaign. It was before September the 11th, and the threat was coming, but I was finished. It was like seeing myself as a destroyed city, and not hardly able to move through the day. And little by little, life picked it up. I kind of surrendered to the depression, but then there was magical things, like I was in a bookshop just walking, because walking was the only thing that gave a moment's mercy from this suffering, while the children were at school. And I went into a bookshop and I just walked immediately to a shelf, and there was the face of the Dalai Lama looking back, the way to happiness. And this is a moment of instant recognition. I didn't even remember, wasn't in the spirituality at all, but I took the book, like a lifeline. And his writings about compassion as an antidote to fear and the practice of replacing yourself in the other, I would try anything at that moment. And it really worked. And so there were many little synchronicities that helped show the way forward, step by step. I began just massaging people's feet. Not my own, because that didn't somehow help me feel better, but the feet of the children, the feet of my husband, and then moved into the smells, the aromatherapy. This helps so much, the smell. Now it makes sense to me, because smell bypasses the control function. And it's a sensory perception that directly awakens something from far beyond a normal thinking mind. And so that was a process of erasure.
And Georgi, in all this time of suffering, did you ever remember your experience you had as a child?
Yes, but I was so nervous. I was so anxious. It wasn't possible to have the nervous system activated like that. In a way, I was always in a kind of awakened, aroused state. It was a total imbalance. There was nowhere to sink down into. There was no way into the body.
Yeah.
It was a kind of spiritual psychosis in that sense.
So you could not sense into
But then one time I lay down in total panic, my stomach totally in contractions, and utterly, in a way, just surrendered to the horror of it. And I hadn't quite fallen asleep, and I had this vision, and I wasn't in meditation or anything at that stage. And it was that I was on the hills near our house in the Mount Carmel in Israel, and came from the distance a nun and a man. No, a nun and a woman. And I was laughing because the nun was dressed, there was a man dressed as a nun. And I was laughing that he, who I knew so well, was dressed as a nun. And they began to walk across this golden field towards me. And as they walked, there was these two spheres of like white light, so intense, expanding out of them. And as they moved towards me, it was like like I was going to dissolve, I was going to disappear inside the blessing of this white light of them. And inside the dream vision, my son Yedidia, my firstborn, was next to me, young, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and we both turned towards a rock and held the rock. And that brought me back from and it was almost as if I nearly died. It was almost as if they came to take me. And this choice to stay was in the moving towards the rock with my children. And then, because I was in a kind of psychotic state, I began collecting rocks and moving rocks around our garden because it really made me feel better.
Well,
and
you
I painted a
tried to
picture.
ground yourself.
Yes, very much trying to ground myself, yes.
Yes, which was
really just cling to the rock, cling to the rock.
And that was, I assume, the third stage when you said, yet the body was still held prison.
Yes.
How did you open?
Well, first there was the stage of liberating the feelings, which was very much through studying with my partner. He was my teacher then. The spiritual psychology education. This is an education which is really moving without, when we say let's get free of mind, that's a thought. So this is a beautiful exercise. It's given by his teacher, Bob Moore, who was in Denmark, through feeling perception, felt sense, on the chakras, on certain energy points, to allow the energy to move by itself without a story.
Yeah, so you went to Holland to find.
It was in Israel. He
healing.
was, yeah.
Oh, he was in Israel.
Yeah. He was teaching it in Israel.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And little by little, but of itself, without even the stories would come later, but the energy itself would kind of present itself, the blockages, and this spaciousness began to open up. into a kind of, first of all, a permission just to feel what you feel. Just feel it.
Yeah.
And not just feel it and, okay, been there, done that, but really collapse into it, to be curious about it, even if it's an unpleasant feeling. It's this switch where experience becomes yummy, even if it's negative or positive. And it's like we said, the moment you move towards experience like that, towards feeling like that, you're already not the experience. There's a greater spaciousness opening up. So there was this Satori stage, when their heart just burst open with this unconditional love. And it went on for a few months, and I was more functional than ever. This now wasn't a psychosis. It was years after the anxiety, but this incredible release of holding the heart, always holding, always afraid, always with conditions. It all fell like dominoes. And it fell and it fell and it fell for a few months. More expansion, more expansion. I'd reach a border and go through it, and such a stillness and such a love and such an opening to energies and felt presences around as well, like this otherworldly in a way. And then I was hanging out the washing outside, because at the same time I'm a functioning mother and all of that. And I noticed that I was hitting a wall. I was really hitting a wall with this. There was one place where this unconditional love wasn't going to go, and then I realized it was towards myself. I would love Bin Laden, I would love George Bush, I would love but this was a kind of still a resistance, and that's the bridge to where the block was to being in a physical body at all, in a way. Yeah.
How did you overcome that?
So we jump forward another 10 years. So this left me extremely happy. This Satori or enlightenment, but these words are, they have hooks. So this experience of liberated awareness, boundless awareness, left me in a very, very good space with a lot of freedom. But it's like being in a place then of almost happy, almost okay, almost free. It wasn't quite totally relaxed and peaceful and okay yet. It was okay up here and it was okay in meditation, but in terms of living, it wasn't quite there yet. And at a certain stage, I was giving a meditation in where we live, and I came up against this not quite there yet feeling, and there was such a spiritual tiredness in it, such a almost boredom of being in this place where there are layers, and it's almost like states of subtle despair, states of subtle boredom or subtle resistance, like smog.
I called it the itch of the ego.
Yes, or maybe it's the breath of the ego, the smell of it.
I know what you mean.
And there was such a tiredness with it, and then I could feel beneath it I'd really had enough. I really had enough of this. I want to get, and I could feel lifetimes behind me of going through the same cycle, and I had such a passion come forward. I want to get this now, and I don't care if I die in it. I don't care if the worst nightmares happen. I don't care what happens. This is it. I totally give myself now to go all the way. There was a choice, and it was a choice really from the basis. It's enough now. Now I get it. There isn't a tomorrow. I'm not waiting anymore. Even if I burn in it, even if I suffer, and of course the conditions begin to come forward in the meditation. Okay, even if that. So that was a choice, and then things began to move very, very fast. So already there was this open question of the difference between this awakening of the mind, this consciousness, and the opening of the heart. Between head and heart, it's the constant spiral. And it seemed clear to me that the heart wasn't a resting point either, and nor was the head. So there's a duality here, and I wasn't using duality and non-duality as terms then. I didn't even know about it. But there was clearly a spiral. It's not at peace between head and heart. And intuition really, really came to look down on the third level, to look towards the body. And also there was guidance there as well. And I began kind of playfully, because always in the healing education that I'd done, you know, we'd do all the chakras, and of course, you know, I knew that it was important, the lower chakras, but it was like, the root chakra, yeah, you know, that's for baboons, you know, we don't do root chakras here, you know, no need for that, you know. And somehow the invitation came to move more deeply into the body, and what I did was move very deeply into just the feeling sense, the sense perception of the coccyx, of the tailbone. How is it to is it to look at the world from there? So we've got consciousness, this whoomph, we've got awareness, this boundless space. So what does it look like from the perspective of matter, from the body, from the bone, really the base bone of the spine? What does it look like if I let this consciousness completely sink into there? And of course it brings also the atmospheres. So I was pondering that. Still I had to go to work at the university. So I'd packed up the kids to school and I was driving to the university, and they just built this great big tunnel through the Carmel Mountain. It was fresh, a fresh tunnel underground. And so I drove innocently inside this tunnel, all the time in my tailbone, the eyes and ears in a way sensing through the tailbone. And something flipped inside the tunnel where all separation, physical, with the physical began to dissolve. I went in the tunnel in one form and I came out in another form. It's really weird, in the sense that everything, and in a car it's very easy to move into altered states in a way. One thing, the mind is occupied with driving, so that's taken care of, the automatic pilot is busy. But also you've got sense perceptions happening all the time. There's the rumble of the car, there's the music playing, there's the wind, there's lights changing all the time. It's very hard to grab hold of anything. And it's not even, you don't push it away either. So the sense of the engine of the car coming and going, passing physical sensations, and feelings would come forward, but they come and they go. They come and they go, and thoughts would come, but thoughts were much less at that stage because they weren't that relevant, because feelings are more what cause thoughts. But you know, thoughts would come forward like a fear or this, and it's like, okay, it's bounded in space. I'm not bounded in space. The one that can feel the feeling. Sense perceptions. So the body, like now, you know, we don't really know we're alive except for our sense perceptions. Yeah. So we feel our body on the chair. You see me, I see you. We don't see ourselves, we see each other. And it's changing all the time. We feel the air on the face, but it's not stable. These are the only way we even know that we're here. So
through our senses.
Through our senses. And the senses, if you really allow the senses to be here, they're changing all the time. They're channels into the physical. They are the windows, the five senses, and there's more senses, are the windows of the physical. And what's being channeled through the physical into consciousness, and from consciousness through the physical, its content is changing all the time, and it really doesn't matter. Because the one which is moving, the one which is really here, which is here wherever we go, that never moves, isn't that which is bound in time or bound in space. So this one gets stronger and stronger and stronger and expands in a way into a kind of unity. And I arrived at work. And it begins the technology transfer discussion. And everything is fluid, but I'm absolutely going through the motions, but everything is fluid. And she's talking, and I'm looking at myself, talking to myself in a way, but I don't mean any personality. It's like empty, this emptiness.
So Georgi was gone.
Georgi was gone, and Georgi arrived at the same time. It's also, this was the here from the I am here. This is a kind of arrival point at the other end of the tunnel. Like arriving into a here, which is not local to sitting on this chair.
Yes,
it's a here which is here. Also when Georgi was 2 years old and closed her eyes and thought, how am I supposed to go to sleep? This darkness inside. It's the same here tonight when I close my eyes. This timeless, unconfined here. That's the entry point. It's beyond space and beyond time, and we're programmed to not trust it, to not even. It's beyond. It's prior to consciousness. It doesn't need to see anything or to be conscious at all in order to be here. It's not separate.
Is it existence, existing itself, or experience, experiencing itself?
Yeah.
There's no gap, no somebody who experiences it.
There's a somebody, but the somebody is a kind of channel to the source of experience, the source of consciousness, the source of existence. You know,
do you call it the absolute, or is it prior to absolute?
You know, absolute is a tricky word, because absolute suggests it can be seen. It suggests a form, like an absolute form. And it's really not a form. You know, it's also not possible in any way to hold it. Just as you can't, you know, you can be conscious of the effects of consciousness. You can even be conscious of consciousness. But the real source of it, it doesn't see itself. The moment it sees itself, yes. It's made a loop.
Yes, yes.
And the real source of it is, it doesn't need to be conscious, that's a condition. It doesn't need to perceive. It's not dependent on perception. Mm-hmm. It's not dependent on form to be formless. It's the other way around. Mm-hmm. Form depends on the formless in order to be in form. Mm-hmm. It's the source. Mm-hmm. I give an example. You know, we all want to be loved. We all talk about love. We all know what love is. But when you really go into the feeling of love, like, how do we know what love is? Like, how do we feel love?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
It's just, I guess it's just a knowingness. I just cannot say in the moment.
Yes.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. So I asked the wrong person, because that knowingness is really, has that absolute quality to it. For many, me included, love would be described as a warmth, an opening, a pleasant sensation, a nostalgia, an expectation.
But if you're inside the love, you cannot name it.
Yes, no, exactly.
Yeah.
So all of those feelings, like this feeling of heart opening, of expansion, the feeling of warmth, the feeling of pleasure, the feeling of happiness, which we associate with love, these are the effects of love. Yeah. This is what happens when what you could call the absolute is moving through this dimension. And this great unknown, imperceivable absolute is moving through this direction, through this form, and so the effect is opening. It's the opening of the form. Yeah. But the effect is not the cause. The cause is something we can dive into and be at peace in. Yes. And if that same pure life is moving through the head, it's much more likely to be experienced as peace, because the effect is a quietening of the mind, an expansion, a resting, a release of stress. But it's the same one moving. And that one is us. It's the source of who we are. And it's not bound in time. It's the same one that was there as a little girl. Nothing moved, nothing happened, nothing changed. It's the same one that was there when we were most in illusion, most lost, most ignorant. The same one. Nothing moved. It will be the same one without anything happening on the moment we die. It doesn't go anywhere also when we die. The here can be trusted. What I didn't expect is that it's at the core of matter. But then when you begin to look at the science of it, and this is where my day job helped, because I interview a lot of scientists in my day job, you know, you get down to the individual cells and all the intelligence of life, which is from the stem cell through to the cells, expressing itself in form, in harmony, in duality, you know, the left hand, the right hand, in this remarkable beauty. But you go deeper down, you go down into the fundamental particles that make up the cells. And you look into the fundamental particle, and it's 99.9999999% empty.
Yeah.
All of that is imperceivable. That bit that can be perceived, which is our whole life, our whole experience, all the love, all the longings, all the yearnings, all the fear, all the dramas, that's 0.00001%. That means that the only restriction on our pure freedom, on our pure infinite spaciousness, on our indestructible strength and creativity to be here is our minds. In saying that it's the other way around, that all this stuff is 99% and we are the 1%. That's God. That's the source of ourselves. A little tiny bit, it's a misprogramming. Matter dissolves when you get to the core, into pure energy, and that pure energy, I would gamble, is consciousness. It's perception, it's where we are perceiving. And in perceiving, creating, we're co-creating.
So can we say freedom is in our body or through our body?
There is no freedom which excludes anything. Certainly not the body. And the body is... Who are we trying to kid that freedom wouldn't be through the miracle of the physical for as long as we're here? That the opportunity is not here in this miraculously strange thing which we're in. This fluid, living life. Everything is here. And that's where there is a kind of time constriction, because this is our chance while we're physical. While we're manifesting physically, there's an opportunity to do something, to let something move through us. And it's really okay. It's really okay. In a way, it's a bit like IBM being born here. You know, you work for IBM, at the end of the day, you give back your equipment and you're free of IBM, and IBM goes on. You know, it's not really our problem. But we are here. And we're here because it's absolutely right for us to be here right now in whatever position we are. The most damaging thing we can do ourselves is to believe that we're not free in being here. And with every judgment that we make on ourselves, that it's not okay to be as we are taking away that freedom, which is always here, regardless of what form we're taking. And it's very deeply programmed. This goes back to the kind of the deeper layers of liberation in a way. You know, it's in the Bible, the throwing out of Eden that happened because we're guilty. This condemnation.
We are sinner.
We are condemned. But it's not just the religion that does this, it's also the healers, it's also us New Age people. We're trying to fix it. So in trying to make the world a better place, what are we saying? What are we feeding? You know, we're feeding a message that the world is not okay as it is. We don't accept it. In a way, collectively, we are perpetually condemning ourselves. Humanity puts itself in a state of condemnation. And then begins this whole game of being okay. Is it okay for me to be here? Am I acceptable? Did I do good? It's very childish in a way. Yeah. But inside the opium field of the collective awareness, we need those leaps of freedom into conscious awakening in order to release the condemnation. Maybe that's what they mean when they talk about redemption, but it's not historic and it's not future, it's inside us.
Georgi, I'm afraid we have to stop. We just covered a fraction of your story. But maybe we have another chance. Yeah. Well, anyway, it was beautiful talking to you.
It was beautiful talking to you too.
And so this was Georgi White-Johnson, and I show her book again, I Am Here, Opening the Windows of Life and Beauty. And thank you for watching Conscious TV, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.